Perhaps rather controversially, I've never really adhered to that whole thing of you can't be a true petrolhead unless you've owned an Alfa Romeo. I get that the kind of romanticism and the sort of like the soul behind the brand, if you will, but I've always found them to be cars that kind of lull you in with the way they look, only for them then to disappoint you with the way that they drive. Now, I say this with some experience because I have owned an Alfa Romeo, and I have to say that it's the shortest time that I've ever owned a car for. I thought it looked absolutely gorgeous, I really did. But every time I drove it, I just found the whole experience was a bit meh. Now, for years, Alfa have been promising that they're going to change that. They're going to give us cars that are as exciting to sort of like drive and as easy to live with as their Teutonic rivals, yet still as good looking as Alfas always have been. And if we were going to do that with a car, then of course Alfa's sort of like history is steeped in the sort of like that sort of like sports saloon. And if ever there was a car that sort of like they were going to go up against and show that they can stand head to toe with the very, very best that German can do, of course it would be an M3, which means that they've got to give us sort of like a sporting saloon that's fast and exciting to drive. And if that's the case, then surely there can't be anything faster and more exciting than this, the newly updated Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Let's put it to the test and find out what we think. Welcome to this week's new car review. Welcome to the updated Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Sit yourself down, make yourself comfortable in the house of cars. Now, before we get started on this week's road test review of Alfa Romeo's updated Giulia Quadrifoglio, would you mind ever so much making sure that you're subscribed to the House of Cars channel? Once you've done that, press the little bell button that's down below, because that way you get notified when my next video is uploaded and it's gone live. If you enjoy it, then make sure you give it a thumbs up, and of course don't forget, leave me your thoughts in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about the cars that we review on the House of Cars channel, and of course on the channel as a whole. Now, confession time. I've driven a Giulia Quadrifoglio before, back when I was kind of freelancing and doing some work for magazines. When the car first came out, I spent some time with one, and I wrote an article for the magazine on the car, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great car. But that was a long time ago, in fairness, and the world has changed since then, and that's a little bit of the issue that I think Alfa Romeo are facing, because the world of the automotive manufacturer moves quite quickly now, and we've seen updated cars from their rivals, of course, the BMW M3, the Audi RS4, the Mercedes-Benz, the Mercedes-AMG C63, those kind of cars which the Quadrifoglio competes with. So have Alfa done enough with this update to keep it relevant? It's all very well looking good, but it needs to perform, especially at this price point. So does it? But before we start on the road test review, let's take a quick look about the main points about the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. Launched in 2016, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio has now had a midlife refresh with revised styling as well as some mechanical and technological changes. The engine remains a 2.9 litre twin-turbo V6, but now power is increased to 520 brake horsepower with 600 Nm of torque. There's a revised interior now featuring better infotainment system and digital instrument cluster, as well as new trim. And prices start at £78,000 before options. Now, passion and soul is all very well and good, but when you're asking people to part with nearly £80,000, it also has to work in the basic functions of a car. And that's something that Alfas have never quite got the hang of before. So what have they done to the new Giulia Quadrifoglio to make you think that maybe you shouldn't have bought that M3 or that RS4 and bought one of these instead? Time to pop it through a House of Cars road test review and find out whether you have bought the right car or not. Right, let's start with styling, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, because I don't think the Giulia is as good looking a car as the car that it replaced, the 159. There, I've said it. I don't think it's a bad looking car. I think it's a much nicer looking car than, say, an M3, but I also don't think it's Alfa's best efforts. Yeah, there's just elements of it that are a little bit kind of clumsy and not quite proportioned that I just don't think work particularly well. Proportions that worked really well on the 159 had a kind of brooding, sinister look about it. It was like one of those kind of nasty villains in a kind of Italian mafia movie. You know, he's just a bit sinister, but there was something good looking about him as well, and he's dressed well. You know the type I mean? That's what I mean. It's kind of like that. What have they changed for the facelift? Well, oddly enough, they've gone back to sort of like, you know, the sort of like separate headlamps kind of underneath these single covers, which the 159 had. In a sense, it had separate sort of like lights around the front. So you've got your three headlamp units, which are behind this single pane here. And that's going to filter onto the other models within the range, and you'll see that across some of their SUVs as well. You've still got, obviously, the big Alfa Shield grille in the front with the lovely Milanese badge sort of like at the top there, which just ekes into sort of like the nose cone. And obviously, as usual, you get your offset number plate, very traditional Alfa sort of style. But that, I'm led to believe, is going to be filtered out in new models as well. So you're not going to see the offset number plate on some of their future cars, which is a bit of a shame, really. At the bottom, you've got cooling as well, so you've got the kind of grills there. It's just a bit plasticky, you know, for an £80,000 car. There's a lot of plastic going on there, but you do get carbon fibre at the front on the splitter, and you'll see that round bits of the rest of the car. And of course, to extricate the heat from underneath the bonnet, you get these lovely kind of grills on the bonnet. But yeah, it's all right, you know. As I say, it's not an ugly car, but it's not exactly a pretty car. I think it's the side profile that does it for me. There's something kind of, I don't know, it's just a bit out of proportion here. It just looks a bit kind of dumpy around here. It's not quite as, the 159 a really kind of sharp kind of line along it with this nice kind of crisp rear pillar, and this just, yeah, it just doesn't have it. Anyway, there we go. 19-inch teledial wheels are standard. You do get an option to go for lightweight alloys. I think these are quite nice. The lightweight ones are a bit more, but you know, again, the kind of teledial wheels are very kind of traditional Alfa Romeo. Of course, you get your red brake calipers as well, and then you get your green cloverleaf on the side there as traditional with the sort of like the Alfa sort of like sporting heritage there. You know, you get that there, and again another kind of vent at the side, which leads into this nicely kind of scalloped out part there. You know, you can just see that line that goes down and just swoops around there. That's okay. I don't mind that so much. Carbon aero kit on the side as well, so again, that's nice. It'd be nice if they'd kind of matched it all up though. These are just kind of gloss black mirrors. Why don't they have the carbon round the front grille and the mirror caps to match the rest of it? So you've kind of got three elements working there. You know, you've got some carbon, then you've got some black plastic, and then body colour. Why not make it all the same? Anyway, there we go. Privacy glass at the back, and then, as I say, it all kind of flows back into this slightly dumpy rear end for me. But we'll talk about that in a second there as we go around the back of it. But yeah, as I say, it's not a bad looking car, and it's way better looking than, say, an M3, certainly from the front. But yeah, I just think they've done better in the past. Now around the back, you can tell that it's not just a standard Giulia, because obviously you get this lovely big kind of carbon spoiler that's on the boot lid there, and I do like that. That's nice. The light signature as well isn't too bad either. It's got this kind of swoosh, this kind of inverted tick that kind of comes down there. Reminds me a little bit of the Maserati kind of Gran Turismo, those rear lights, which is a good thing. You know, that's not a good thing. Big Alfa badge there, Giulia there. There's no sort of like Quadrifoglio kind of badging on the car, save for the green cloverleafs on the front wings, so that's fine. And then at the bottom you get your quad tailpipes. Now you can have an Akrapovic exhaust as an option on the car if you want. This car doesn't have it, but they would come with a carbon fibre kind of tips on it as well. And then again, you just a kind of black, kind of graphite-y black kind of plastic surround to that diffuser. You know, I mean, lovely, heavily sculpted rear diffuser, but why not make it carbon like the rest of it? It just seems odd that they've got all these different kind of materials. But look, as I say, it's not a bad looking car, that's not what I'm saying. I just don't think it's the best efforts, and as I say, I don't think it's as good looking a car as the 159. Imagine if they'd done a sort of like a Quadrifoglio version of the 159, how good that would have looked. But forget what I think, what do you think? Do you think it's good looking? Would you have this over the M3? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Now it's all very well talking about twin turbo V6s and, you know, limited slip differentials and over 500 horsepower and carbon fibre this and carbon fibre that, but it's a sports saloon, which means it's got to work just as a saloon car. You've got to use this just as your everyday car. It's not a sort of like quirky little sports car. It could be just your only car, so it has to be practical. Well, It's got 480 litres of boot space, so yeah, I'd say that's quite practical. And it's like a decent sort of size, it's a decent shape. Obviously you're slightly limited, but there's a slightly kind of narrower kind of gap here. And again, I think that is product of that styling, with that kind of the rear screen coming too far back. You know, they've got a slightly short, stubby boot lid, which means the gap to get stuff in is quite narrow. But in fairness, I don't have them here, but you'd certainly get 3, if not 4, of my suitcases that are usually used to test these in there. You'd certainly get 2, if not 3 sets of golf sticks across the back there as well, and it's all nicely carpeted as well, and the sort of like the hinges are covered in a nice kind of sort of like plastic trim, and they don't sort of like intrude into the boot area. So in fairness, in terms of practicality, it certainly does work. But again, like the 159, you could get that in a sport wagon. You could have an estate version, which again was a really pretty car. Why, Alfa, did you not do an estate version of the Giulia? That'd have been a great car. Estates are cool. Right, rear seat space. Well, it's all right. I mean, in fairness, that seat slides back whenever I get out. I'm only 5'8", so let's say that that's maybe a 6-footer's driving position. I can sit behind them, you know, there's not too much of a problem there. The backs of the seats are sculpted out a little bit, and I sit really low in the car, so the seat is right down low, and I can still get my feet underneath the front seat. So in fairness, yes, rear seat accommodation is fine for 2, because if you try to get 3, there's no way, because you get this huge big transmission tunnel here. You know, but obviously there's a prop shaft, right, because it's rear wheel drive the car. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Face vents in there, nice, and you get a USB port there for obviously charging up devices. Tiny door bins, and I do mean tiny. You will just get a Mars bar in there. That's about it. However, for water bottles, you've got this flip down armrest. I did mean to mention, sorry, I should have done when we were in the boot, the rear seat back splits 60-40. So if you've got longer items, you know, if you're trying to use it as being practical and go in the garden centre or whatever, you can fold the back seats down as well. So you get slightly more kind of extended length in the load bay. So that's quite helpful. But there isn't like a load through facility. And obviously if you use one of the sides, then obviously you can't carry as many passengers as say if you have that 40-20-40 split that some cars do. But at least you do have it, so that's all right. And the seats themselves, well, they're quite nicely padded and they're quite nicely sculpted out in the back as well. Feel quite hard, but I mean this is obviously a press demonstrator car. Maybe over time they would soften up a little bit. But yeah, for 2 people in the back, there's probably more than enough space that you'd get. You've also got a decent amount of headroom. Again, bear in mind I'm only 5'8", so again, if you're kind of maybe on the 6-foot mark, I don't know, maybe you're starting just to find that encroaching into you a little bit, but it's not too bad at all, in fairness. Right, last thing to talk about is this. You get good access to ISOFIX points. This makes me very happy. I like to see stuff like that because, again, if you're using it as a practical everyday style of car, you may have children, they may still be in child seats, and you've got to be able to get access to the ISOFIX points nice and easily. So they're not kind of, you're not jabbing the prongs in between sort of like, you know, the bits of the leather or whatever. They're just these flip up covers. You flip them up and push them in. So yeah, that's good bonus point there for you, Alfa Romeo, for doing that. But yeah, as I say, rear accommodation, it's not huge, but it's probably more than enough for most people's needs, I would have thought. Right. What have they changed in here? Well, quite a bit in some respects. You've got a new digital instrumentation cluster, which I have to admit is quite good. I quite like it. It's nice, it's clear, it's relatively crisp, it's relatively easy to understand as well. And there is a way you can configure it depending obviously on what you want to see. It's not like the BMW cockpit where you can really change it, or Audi's virtual cockpit, you know, you can really, you know, throw the nav up there and do all sorts of funny things with. But in fairness, it gives you the information that you want as a driver in this style of car. So, for instance, you know, you can have the big speedometer sort of like, you know, in the middle there. You can see your messages in the centre. You can have the driver assistance kind of thing in the centre. You can do a kind of performance meter, you know, with average MPG and stuff like that there. So you can change that. You can also change the right-hand dial. It can show you things like tire pressure monitoring, your trip meter, a compass for some reason. Media sort of like, you know, is showing on there as well, so that's good. And then if you, is this the right one? If I press this again, yeah, no, that's that one, that's it really, yeah, that's it. So you can change bits of it, okay, probably enough in that sense. So you've still got the kind of cowled look of the dashboard, if you like. But then we move on to the bad bit, which is this 7-inch infotainment system, which Alfa say is all brand new and updated. Really? Because I'll tell you now, it's a pile of poo as far as I'm concerned. It's absolutely rubbish, this thing. For a start, the clarity is poor. It looks really grainy, okay? And it's laggy, okay? You know, it just doesn't work that well, yeah? And the other thing is, you do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it's wired. Why is it wired in an £80,000 car? Why is it not wireless? And when you use the nav system, which is a TomTom system, and I was using it the other day, I went to a Toyota launch the other day, and I knew roughly where I was going, but I just needed a little bit, and I thought I'll just have the map up, because I normally don't like, I couldn't turn the voice prompts off. I looked everywhere for it. Now maybe I'm a bit thick, and I know I'm not the world's most advanced human being, but it should be simple to use, and it's not. And it's just slow, and it's laggy, and it's poor, and it has no right being in a car in this class of this quality at this price as far as I'm concerned. So that's a pile of rubbish, Alfa. I don't care what you say, that's poor, yeah? You have the touch screen, as you can see there, like it's just all shit. Yeah, I don't like it. Wait. And it's just not, and it's not simple to use. It's not easy to kind of navigate through. You know, drag and drop to reorder widgets. Well, no, because it's laggy and it's horrible. You can use this kind of iDrive style controller here, which does kind of sharpen up a little bit in terms of how quick it is. But again, it's just the basic functionality is just crap. Sorry, but I think it's awful. Thankfully, the rest of the kind of redesign is okay. Now, it does feel, in fairness, the design of the interior is a bit last generation. You know, it does feel like it's a car that came out in 2016, let's be honest, the Giulia. And you can tell that, you know, it's like an iPhone 6 and an iPhone 15 world. You know, it's got the functions, it does that, but you know there's a lot better out there, you know. I do like this new carbon trim, this raw carbon. I do like that. Now, I know some people think it looks a bit like rattan garden furniture, but I like it. I'm getting a bit tired of kind of glossy materials in cars that just have fingerprints on them and stuff. So that, to me, is actually quite nice. I do like that. So yeah, that's good. The steering wheel is worthy of a mention as well, because it's absolutely perfect, I think. It's the right diameter, it's the right girth, it's the right width. It feels nice in your hand. It's like a leather rim, apart from the bits where your thumb sit, the 1/4-9 bit, that's just got the little Alcantara bit, so it feels really tactile. And it's just very slightly flattened off at the bottom, so it is really a circular wheel. I love that, and I really think it's got a nice look to it. You've got your simple 3-spoke design. The buttons are quite small, but what they are, they work really well. So your driver assistance and cruise control on this side, and your media control, you know, for your telephone and your volume and track search on that side, and then your little red Smarty there, which is your engine stop-start. That is lovely. That is good. And behind it are these beautiful metal paddles, which are, thank the Lord, attached to the column. So it's always the right one for an upshift, always the left for a downshift. So if you're crossed up a little bit, you know, you don't know which one you shouldn't be changing gear in a corner anyway. Check park brake, it's on. You shouldn't be changing gear in a corner anyway, but even so, it's just like the fact they're attached to the column, and they're metal, and they've got just a nice action to them. That's good. And in fairness, the rest of the materials are okay. You know, this kind of leather kind of style up on the top of the dash here is quite nice. The touch has got a kind of matte finish to it, and then this kind of rubberized lower section. You know, it feels good as well. And the padded bit down the centre console, and it's the same when you get the carbon weave up on the door as well. The only slight bit of hard plastic is this flimsy bit of cowling over the dials, but you're not going to spend your time doing that. You know, so that's the only thing. Or maybe the column stocks could maybe do with a slightly nicer kind of action to them and a feel to them. And every time you just flick them on, you've got to put it, they're quite difficult to sort of like turn off if you don't self-cancel them. But other than that, I can't complain about the kind of switchgear and the quality of the plastics. That's good. You've got physical controls here, so for your air conditioning system, where they've got the kind of rubber rim round them, you know, again, they've got nicely kind of feel to them for just turning up and down, and the same with the fan speed one there. And then you've got physical buttons here, you know, for things like, you know, face vents, heated steering wheel, and your heated seats. So you don't have to delve into the screen, thank God, to switch those kind of functions on. So that's good. Storage is all right. You've got a USB-A port in there. You've got a little sort of like tray in front there for dropping keys into. A couple of cup holders there, which are good enough for water bottles and coffee flasks. The transmission lever, I do like that. This leather transmission, it's this pistol grip, which is lovely. You know, you pull it back to drive, nudge it across for manual so you can use the paddles. Forward, it all springs back, you know, and then push the P for park. So rather than using a switch or buttons, that's good. So that is nice. I do like that. And then behind it are your 3 controls here. So you get this slightly flimsy feeling joystick to control the media, so track search and volume and switching on and off. Then there's the iDrive style controller here, which again is quite nice to use. It feels all right. A home button and a settings button either side of that, and then there's your DNA switch there, which I'll have a wee chat to you about when we're out driving it again, which is a nice feel to it. Tucked in here under the armrest is a wireless charging pad for your mobile. That keeps your phone out of sight. I like that. And there's reasonable, it's not massive. You've got USB-C, USB and auxiliary port in there, a charging point I think for the key, and door bins which are rubber lined on the bottom. So again, that's all right. Seats, got to mention the seats. The seats are really good and they're excellent for a long drive in the car. You know, I was in the car for, you know, sort of like a few hours the other day, as I say, I was going out to this launch, and they support you in just the right places, but they're not too aggressive in their look and feel, you know, that you get with some of those BMW M seats with that kind of carbon back thing. I'm not sure whether you can have the option to do that. I mean, I suppose maybe if you were a bit more kind of performance orientated, track days and the like, you might want that. But for general day-to-day use, you know, not all of us do that. You know, a lot of us just take our kids to school and take them swimming and go to work and drive to the railway station and go to the shops. And for that, these seats are brilliant. They're absolutely really good. You can extend the squab out to give you more support under your thighs. You know, they're electrically adjustable, they're heated. It'd be nice to maybe see them ventilated, but, you know, again, that's a kind of moot point. Adjustable head restraint, and actually the driving position itself is superb. You sit dead ahead, you can see the instrumentation no matter where you move the wheel to. The wheel, as I say, is lovely. The pedals are in the right place. You're not having this kind of Italianate kind of, you know, long arms and short legs like they used to be. That everything feels right and nice. There are some areas, as I say, that you do feel they're a wee bit plasticky, but on the whole, I'd say it's good. So, to summarise, a good interior, let down by that should be an awful lot better than it is. But the interior design is the only thing I feel kind of really just lags behind the main competition in terms of how it works and how it looks. It's well built, you know, and it works, so that, you know, that's a big tick in the box in there, apart from that, which is bloody awful and should be thrown in the bin as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, it's a good effort, but could be better. Let's leave it at that. Now, whilst it might not look as pretty as the old Alfa V6 Busso engine, there's no doubt about it, it does deliver the goods when it comes to performance. What you've got there is a 2.9 litre 90-degree angle V6 engine, which has got twin turbochargers attached to it, and it puts out now 520 horsepower, which is roughly, I think it's just under 20 horses more in the Italian stable than it used to have. 600 newton meters of torque, and that should see the Giulia Quadrifoglio scrabble to 60 miles an hour from rest in just 3.9 seconds, and where allowed, 191 miles an hour. Now, as I say, it's not as kind of aesthetically pleasing as the old Busso engine, but there's no doubt about it, it's a very good power unit. And of course, underneath here, it's not just a big blank kind of piece of plastic, although there is obviously some covers, you can see sort of like bits of engine there. But what is nice, carbon bonnet. Now, there's lots of carbon fibre used around the car as well, so they've tried to kind of keep the weight down and the centre of gravity down in the car, which should certainly help when it comes to the actual performance and handling. And also as well, if you see where the engine's actually sitting, I'm stood by this kind of front axle line here, so most of it is pushed slightly further back as well. So you've got a bit at the front there, sort of like a, you know, for the ancillary stuff out there, and heating and ventilation and cooling stuff, and then the engine's pushed slightly further back to sort of take that weight more towards the centre of the car, which certainly does work. But good engine, works well. Time to get out on the road and see what it's actually like when it comes to performance though. Okay, once you get the Giulia out on the open road, it's a really interesting car, this, because there is like a real double-edged sword to this car that I think is probably better in a lot of ways than some of its contemporaries, because once you sort of like just stick it in drive, it's in the DNA is in the normal, the N for normal, drives just like an Alfa Romeo Giulia, you know. It's quite quiet, It's quite easy to kind of sort of like, you know, pile it round at kind of low speeds. It's absolutely fine. You know, it's an 8-speed automatic gearbox, a torque converter auto. Works really well. It's very nice. Slips through the ratios nice and easily. Nothing that's going to scare you at all about this car in that sense. But of course, you can dial things up a little bit. So, once you kind of get up onto the open road a little bit more. So you've got, as I say, you've got it in D at the moment, or I've got it in D at the moment. I can now move the lever across to the left, and now I'm in manual mode. And I've got a right paddle to upshift, and a left paddle to downshift. Simple as that. You can also use the gear lever itself, so you pull it back to upshift, push it forward to downshift. Very straightforward, very nice and easy. And then flick it back across to when you're in D. If you're in drive and you just quickly want to do a quick, you know, without moving that, you can quickly select a gear via the paddles, but then it'll default back to sort of like just D after a while, you know, so it'll slip back into sort of like the full auto mode. Okay, so that's the first kind of aspect of it. If we now change the DNA switch to dynamic, right, now things start to alter a little bit now. I've got a much sharper throttle response. The dashboard has changed more, so I've got much more kind of red, obviously, as you expect on these things. And as I say, things are going to come alive a little bit more. So there's a sharper throttle response. The exhaust valve opens as well, and the steering starts to kind of weight up. Now the steering is very good. It's fine in kind of normal mode for when you're pootling around town, but when you stick it into the dynamic mode, and it gets a little bit more weight behind the helm, yeah, it's good. And then, as I say, you've got that exhaust that just kind of opens up a little bit more, and you get much more kind of that kind of gravelly kind of exhaust note that you'd expect from an Alfa engine. Okay. And as I say, when you're in the dynamic mode and you flick the lever across into the manual mode and you start to use the gear shifts, it's just a lot more tactile, and you get much more of that noise out of the car as well. So it does feel a lot sportier now. Now the power is huge, you know, it's 520 brake horsepower. I know there are more powerful cars out there than that, but it's a relentless power that you get with the Alfa. It doesn't feel turbocharged, which is quite interesting. I'm not sure, I should have looked it up before I started, but I'm guessing it's sort of got a slightly, you know, it's got a turbo that will work at much lower revs and then one at higher revs, so you don't have that lag. You get that nice seamless flow when the one starts and then the second kicks in. So yeah, so the power is relentless and really linear in the way that it behaves. When you're in the dynamic mode, you've then got this little kind of damper button in the middle of the dial, and if I push that, the dampers go into the soft mode. So it softens the dampers although you're in the dynamic mode. The one I like, however, believe it or not, is when we go into race, which is a further twist and hold. Now, when you're in race mode, everything is properly hunkered down now. This is proper, full-on, full-bore attack mode. And it switches all of the electronic stability control systems off. However, the interesting thing with this mode is you can then press the damper switch again, and it puts the dampers into the middle setting. And this, I think, is the mode that I like on the road, for when you want to get a bit of a hustle on. Now I'll tell you why in a second. I'll tell you why you want the dampers to kind of do that in many ways. The reason being is, whilst you've got the ESC system off, that gear shift, you get that real kind of jolt through, like you're doing it yourself as well. That's what I do like about it. Now let me go back to the dampers. The reason why it's nice to have that slack and damper off is this. By switching the ESC, by going into race mode, you switch off the ESC mode. So effectively what you're doing is you could effectively lose a bit more grip. Yeah, because obviously what happens is if you start to lose grip, the ESC system cuts in and the nanny state goes, oh no, don't do that, and it puts its arms around you and says, stop that, stop misbehaving, and it does that. By putting it into race mode, you turn that off. But then what you do is you knock the dampers into the middle setting, because that then allows the dampers to have a bit more give in them, a bit more compliancy. Because what you want is you want the wheels to stay in contact with the road. Now if they're in the stiffest setting, as you hit a bump on any road or whatever, you will lose a contact patch with the road. So at some stage the wheels will lose contact with the surface, and that's when you get into trouble. That's when things get a little bit silly. That's when you dip into the pool of talent and find that it's empty. So what you want is a damper that has a bit more travel, so when it does hit that bump, when it does lose that sort of like, you know, when it does hit across a sort of like an undulation, there's a bit more travel and it allows it to stay in touch with the road surface, but still not have the nanny state of the ESC system kicking in and spoiling your fun. That's the setting that I think works really well in this car. Right, so that's what I'd advise you do if you've got one of these, because that's what it really works. And of course you get the steering and a really nice weighty sort of like feel to it. It points exactly where you want the car to go. Everything's just, you know, really focused, and that's when the Giulia Quadrifoglio really comes alive. It doesn't feel as bombastic as the M3. That's what I will say. There's a tiny bit, it's like it's operating at level 9 rather than the M3's level 10, if that makes sense. That's how it feels. It's not quite as raw as an M3. And there's a joy to be had with that, but I also feel there's a frustration to be had with that as well, where you're maybe not quite in the mood for that. And that's another thing you've got to consider too. And then when you're tired of it all, you just dial it back to normal. Back into drive. It's just a normal automatic saloon car now. It's a real Jekyll and Hyde, this car, and I do like it. I like it a lot. There's a lot to be said for it. Now, they've also fitted a more mechanical limited slip differential at the back, which is better. It just is better. It just works well. None of this fancy electronic stuff. You know, it just, you know, simple engineering works on these cars, and it works here very, very well. So that's the correct thing to have done here. And again, they've not done silly with the power, which is another good thing. The brakes are very good. They've got a nice kind of progressive feel to them. You've got a nice feel under the pedal. You know exactly what's happening as soon as you start to apply them. It hauls the speed off quite nicely and allows you to get the car just set up nicely for that wee string of bends that you want to put it through. Flick this back into dynamic mode here, into the manual mode as we come down through these bends. Fourth, there we go, and then you're on the brakes, downshift, turn in, back on the power. Yep, lovely. Second, flick into the roundabout, and we're round. And you see there, that there is what I meant by that damper. It hit that bump and the wheel travel was allowed to move. So I didn't lose contact with the road surface. That's what I'm talking about. That's why it works. Good car, this. Really good car. Now the last thing to talk about really is the ride quality. And as I say, oh, let me just squeeze past this very badly parked Amazon Prime van. Have you noticed how Amazon Prime vans now, when they first came out, when Amazon first did the Prime delivery vans, they're always pristine. Has anybody noticed how beat up they look now? It's like they just don't care about how they look. Is that just me? Anyway, ride quality. Now this is a particularly bad section of road I'm going down here, and I have to say, bear in mind he's got 19-inch wheels and some big sticky rubber on it, some very low profile tyres. That's not bone-shakingly bad. And I'm in dynamic mode, but as obviously I've slacked the dampers off. But that's pretty good actually in terms of the ride quality. I'm impressed with that. I'm impressed with the car. You know, I don't want to come across as someone that you know that's going to be down on the car. It's very good. You know, as a sports saloon, as a fun car to drive. It is the kind of car that you do want to get up early in the morning for, and just, you know, while everyone else is asleep, head off down through the roads, the Sussex roads, down towards Goodwood for a bacon roll and a cup of coffee for your breakfast. It is that type of car. But it's also the type of car that, you know, in 2 hours I'm going to take my daughter to a swimming class in. You know, we're going to go out shopping in later. You know, it's that kind of car as well. You know, and had I, you know, needed to sort of like make a long trip up to Scotland to see my mum or my son or something, you could quite easily do it. Because I see, you just flick it into auto, you dial it back into normal, and there it is. It's a good car, but it was good when it came out in 2016. It was good back then. It's still good today. So, how much? Well, it's £78,000, which if you say it quick enough, doesn't really hurt that much, does it? The one thing I'll say about the Giulia Quadrifoglio, however, is you don't really need to add on loads of different option packs, and there's no big options to tick. There's a couple, you know, paint finish, for instance, if you want different paint finish, different brake calipers, if you want the lightweight 19-inch wheels, or the Akrapovic exhaust, that type of thing. But you don't need them, is what I'm trying to say. You can drive away with a £78,000 car and feel quite happy. You won't feel shortchanged that you don't have this particular option when all, you know, the other guys say, well, you should have had that, you should have had that. So that's the one thing I will say about it. There's no big option packs to have on the car. So yeah, while 78 grand is not exactly chump change, you don't really have to spend any more than that. Now, in terms of competition, what else are you going to be looking at? Well, of course, M3. I mean, that is target number one when it comes to this car, you know. And if you're looking at M3, then of course you've got Audi RS4 and the Mercedes-AMG C63, which has lost a little bit of favour with a lot of people because of it's gone to like 4-cylinder hybrid power. Then, you know, you expect a car like this to have, you know, multi-cylinder engines, you know, like V6, V8, you know, that type of thing. So I suppose Mercedes has lost a little bit of ground there. And that's really sort of it, I suppose, in terms of that more focused, proper sports saloon. You know, Lexus, when they did have the ISF, I think they've kind of moved away from, they don't have the IS anymore, so they've kind of moved away from this market space. So there is quite a small market when you think about it. And within Stellantis Group, of which Alfa Romeo is part of, you've also got Peugeot, which do the sort of like the 508 Peugeot Sport Engineered, which was a car we tested right back when we started House of Cars. But it's way down on the power of this. It's not the same price point. A good car, but it's not really a competitor for this. But although you might maybe think about it as one, if you're looking at a new one of those, you could get a used one of these for the same kind of price. So, you know, but then these are quite good value for money as a used proposition now in a lot of ways. So yeah, so there's not a huge amount of competition out there for this than this traditional sort of like 3-box saloon. But if you sort of like start to encompass things such as crossovers and SUVs as well, then maybe that might broaden your horizon a little bit more. But generally speaking, it's the M3, it's the RS4 and the C63. Make no mistake about it, the Giulia Quadrifoglio is a good car. It could even be a great car in some respects, and it's easy to fall under the charms of it and wax lyrical about how good the car drives. That bit is very, very easy. However, it's also a very frustrating car, and my frustration with it probably lies more with Alfa Romeo than it does with the car itself. Bear with me on this because I'm going on a bit of a rant here. Alfa seem to be living on past glories. New customers today don't really care about the Targa Florio. They don't care about the Mille Miglia. They probably think it's a variety of pizza, in fairness. They don't care about the fact that Nuvolari was the ace that he was behind the wheel of one of their cars. None of that matters. What they want is modern technology. They want connectivity, they want sustainability, and they still want it wrapped up in a usable everyday performance car. And that's the bit that frustrates with this car. This car feels its age. It feels, as I say, like an iPhone 6 and an iPhone 15 world. Nothing wrong with an iPhone 6, but the iPhone 15 is a hell of a lot better and a lot more modern. And I feel that Alfa as a brand just aren't paying attention enough to the potential that lies within this car. This is the only car that Alfa Romeo build. Otherwise it's SUVs, the Junior, the Tonale, the Stelvio. That's it. It's just the Giulia, and then you can only really get 2 models. You know, you get the one with the 2-litre turbocharged engine or this Quadrifoglio. That's it. It's like they don't really care about the car anymore, and that seems very evident in this facelift. It's a bit like, and I have to be really careful here what I say as a Scot, especially living in England, but it's a bit like England that keep going on about winning the World Cup in 1966. Well done, but give us something new to celebrate. Yeah, it's like that old thespian actor that used to, you know, that was brilliant on Othello, sitting propping the bar up in a West End pub, telling you how sort of like, you know, it's not like the good old days anymore. You're right, stop talking about it. Go back out there and show us how good you can be. That's where I find this car frustrating. Not with how it drives, but with the way that Alfa, I dare I suggest, have treated it, and dare I suggest, not kept it going. They're too busy living on past glories, and these days buyers don't really care about that. So in other words, whilst it is a good car, and as I say, it may be a great car, it remains an alternative choice rather than the definitive choice in this market sector. Thanks ever so much for watching another new car review on House of Cars. As always, please make sure that you're subscribed to the channel if you don't mind. It's new. I'd quite like a few more subscribers, so if you can tell your friends about it, that'd be great too. Once you've subscribed, press the bell button that's down there, because that's the way you get notified when the next video is uploaded and it goes live. If, you know, as I say, if you've got any comments, I mean, maybe you'd completely disagree with what I've just said, and you own an Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio, and you want to tell me off for talking disrespectfully about the Italian brand of Alfa Romeo, then please by all means do so in the comment section down below. I will look forward to that, no doubt. We're on Instagram as well, at House of Cars 1973, and if you're into electric cars, if you maybe the thought of driving around in a big V6 twin turbo engine car just makes your skin crawl, and what you want is full electric cars, then take a look at Auto EV, because that's the other channel that I present on, which is just to do with electric cars. Okay, but if it's a small car or a big car, a slow car or a fast car, an old car or a new car, then you'll find it here in the House of Cars. Thanks for watching, thank you for supporting the channel, I'll see you again soon.